Hey guys, what's up? It's your boy from Down Under, Daydream Deluxe. I want to apologise for not visually appearing in the last video that I did on Ouija Posse, but I hope you enjoyed that last video because I had a lot of fun making it and it was great talking to Ouija Posse himself. Yeah, that's a video I've wanted to do for quite a while, but now we're getting into some darker territory, much like what we did with Justice Yeldon video, but there's no blood involved. I promise you on that. So this next video is all about one of my most favourite bands, the Mars Volta. If you haven't already heard of them, don't worry, I'll give you a quick rundown of who they are and all that kind of stuff in the video. But in regards to this certain topic about the band, let's just say that there are a lot of weird events that we kind of expect to have at least some kind of logical explanation, but sometimes that's not always the case. Sometimes we could have been tampering with some kind of force that we have never yet been exposed to, and we don't even know how. Sometimes we have, but who knows? Let me give you an example. When you see something on your computer that you are seeing getting deleted, do you think that it's always the computer itself? Could it be you doing it? Or maybe it's something else. Something that doesn't have any logical explanation, like I said before. So if you're wondering what exactly it is I'm talking about the band's fourth record, which was released in 2008, the Bedlam In Goliath. And this has to be one of the most insane stories that I've ever heard in regards to the production of a certain album. A number of bands have some hiccups every now and then when it comes to the music production. I mean, it's a very stressful time for everyone. They're constantly fighting with each other. Sometimes they have to do constant retakes of a certain part of a song, but not quite like what the Mars Volta went through when they were making this album. So strap yourselves in because it's going to be a wild one. And if you're not good with ghosts, the supernatural or anything like that, I highly suggest you click off this video and watch something else because this shit's going to get dark. So let's get into it.
Let me ask you a question. Do you believe in the supernatural? It's certainly a divisive topic to debate, as there have been many stories told by those that came into contact with paranormal entities. Some were unfortunately subjected to curses that would last as little as a few days, or at the most, their entire life. Personally, I've never experienced any of the sorts, let alone seen a ghost, but the stories I've heard from friends and that I've read on multiple forums are enough for me to believe that there is some kind of psychic energy out there. Above all, you never know what could occur should your curiosity tamper with the unknown through a Ouija board in the middle of a seance. Whether spiritual or purely from another human, curses can be contrived from just about any medium and can wreak havoc on anyone, even those you would least expect, like one of my favourite bands of all time, the Mars Volta. Now, I'm not going to be analysing the history of who they were or anything, but I'll happily give you all a really quick rundown. The Mars Volta are a now defunct Grammy award-winning progressive rock band based in El Paso, Texas, consisting of Cedric Bixler-Zavala and Omar Rodriguez-Lopez, both of whom were once part of the post-hardcore quintet At the Drive-In. Cedric and Omar were the prime members of the Mars Volta, while the liner notes of their album stated that its roster of contributors and musicians were part of what was known as the Mars Volta Group. In the 11 years of them composing and touring together, the Mars Volta released 6 full-length LPs, all of which have some of the most fascinating backstories in rock music. Which brings us to what we're here to examine today, the Bedlam In Goliath, the band's 4th LP released in early 2008. Regarding the conceptualization of a particular record, this has to be my most favourite of the bunch, and I've been researching this ever since hearing it for the first time. If you haven't already heard of this LP or are unfamiliar with the tale of how it came to fruition, then allow me to tell you all about the dark and unfortunate events that surrounded the production of what became the Bedlam In Goliath. It all started in 2006, when guitarist and producer Omar Rodriguez-Lopez travelled to Israel for a holiday. While on his journey through the Middle Eastern city of Jerusalem, Omar would do some field recording in the Jewish, Christian and Muslim quarters of the city that he later used as part of what he and the Mars Volta wanted to do next after their third full-length Amputecture. Then one day, Omar met a street vendor that brought him into a curio shop situated from a flea market that he visited. The shop sold a variety of archaic items and ornaments such as candle holders, amulets, and even some jewelry. Some of the objects for sale were also considered to be blasphemous and possibly sacrilegious to certain areas of Jerusalem. It was also at that moment when browsing through the store, Omar saw something that would at some point change the Mars Volta forever. What he found appeared to be a sort of antique spirit board, albeit not one that could be considered a Ouija board. He then decided to purchase the talisman as a gift to bring back for vocalist Cedric Bixler-Zavala simply for how it was crafted and decorated. Soon after, Cedric would name the board the Soothsayer, and eventually became a post-concert activity for the Mars Volta to play with while they were on the Stadium Arcadium tour with the Red Hot Chili Peppers in 2006. Upon using the Soothsayer for the first time in their tour bus, the band found poetically structured messages underneath the decal of the board that were transcribed in a mix of Hebrew, Latin, and Aramaic. To understand what was engraved on the board, Cedric hired 2 translators, one of which immediately refunded the money the band had paid them, saying that they didn't want anything to do with it or the Mars Volta ever again. The second, however, stayed to help interpret it and told the band that the passages were written in a sing-song tone. The translator didn't give too much depth into what it all meant, but said to the band, "You'll figure it out in time." Eventually, through the Soothsayer, the band came into contact with a male spirit that identified itself as Goliath. Other sources claim that there were other names that it was known by, such as the Tourniquet Man, Mr. Muggs, and Patience Worth, but Goliath was the actual name that was mentioned by the band. The presence of Goliath also manifested the form of a man, a woman, and her daughter who were supposedly in an ugly love triangle with the man. Cedric, who's known for being cryptic with his lyrics, was in dire straits with writer's block around this time. But luckily for him, the messages that were being transmitted from Goliath through the Soothsayer later made up a majority of the song titles. Cedric also incorporated some of the supernatural passages into the lyrical structure of the album, which helped recuperate his creativity. Despite bringing back something for Cedric that could possibly lead to a catastrophic after effect, Omar, having grown up in the Caribbean with his family during his childhood, was aware of how dangerous Ouija boards could be. In addition to this notion, Omar's family practiced a religious tradition called Santeria, and he had even played with a Ouija board in his youth, but it was nothing like the Soothsayer. Over time, Goliath then began requesting offerings from the band that at one point included a bottle of rum and some flowers. For the most of it, the demands were rather innocent, and the Mars Volta kept fulfilling the desires of the Soothsayer just to get more words out of Goliath for Cedric to write for the LP. Simultaneously, little did they know that the more Cedric wrote down and spoke to the board, the more ominous and belligerent things would get. What Goliath tried to necessitate from the band became all the more obscure as time went by, with the inclusion of wanting to trade places with another person in order to get out of the Soothsayer. It was at this time when the band were getting threats from Goliath if they didn't meet its demands. So because they refused to become surrogates and hosts for Goliath, a series of insane and unfortunate affairs started to unravel and impact the band in ways that they never imagined. They didn't know if all the misfortune that took place actually stems from the curse imposed by the Soothsayer, or that all the bad luck was purely coincidental. Either way, because it didn't get what it wanted, Goliath was hell-bent on making sure that the record never came to life. The Mars Volta was soon met with a myriad of conundrums, including their drummer at the time, Blake Fleming, later replaced by Thomas Pridgeon, quitting mid-tour and left the band to deal with a series of financial struggles. Cedric had sustained an injury to his foot that got so bad, he required surgery and had to relearn how to walk again. And their bassist Juan Alderete was diagnosed with a rare blood disease known as polycythemia vera. Everything circulating around the Mars Volta continued to spiral into madness left, right and centre. Goliath was furious, and to Cedric and Omar, it seemed that the only way to stop the curse from causing any further damage was to complete the album. They didn't know if it was the real solution, but at the time it was their catch-22. Even though they wanted to proceed with finishing the record, one of their engineers wouldn't allow it. During a nervous breakdown in the studio, he frantically said to Omar, "You're trying to do something very bad with this record. You're trying to make me crazy, and you're trying to make people crazy," before quitting in the middle of production with the Mars Volta. The paranoia that the engineer experienced caused him to hijack the tapes from them with the intent of destroying them. Cedric and Omar eventually retrieved the recordings by hiring fellow technicians and roadies to quote-unquote break down his door in order to get them back.
The nervous breakdown of our engineer. Yeah. Him going crazy, hijacking the tapes, stealing them, us having to hire people to break into his house to take our album back from him.
But the consistent stream of bad luck wasn't limited to the band members themselves. The hard drives and tapes containing the demos and expensive pieces of equipment began to malfunction, as well as their own instruments. Tracks and audio files were also disappearing right in front of Omar and the mixing engineer Rich Costi. No matter how far back they went into the folders containing the sessions, they vanished as if they were never made in the first place. Omar tried to convince his mixer that it was no technical error and that it was the result of bad mojo inflicted by a malevolent force. Rich would often dismiss just what Omar said, saying that it was nothing more than a peculiar case of quantum entanglements and that the curse was just his imagination getting the best of him. That was until these conundrums became all the more frequent to Rich, and that there was no logical explanation he could provide to rebuttal. But the most bizarre incident of them all that had everyone lost for words was when the basement studio that Omar hired to record the LP flooded twice. Perversely enough, out of all the 8 rooms in the building, Omar's was the only one that experienced this.
What exactly happened?
Yeah, my studio flooded twice. Our engineer had a mental breakdown. We went through 3 different HD rigs, Pro Tools rigs, 2 different laptops. All sorts of weird things happened.
Even in the midst of all the pandemonium, no one outside of the Mars Volta's lineup were ever made aware of the soothsayer in the first place except for their mixer Rich Costi, who at first never believed it. Not even their original engineer who broke down and seized the tapes knew about how or why the madness ensued. With all the adversity drastically affecting the Mars Volta and their hard work, Omar one day just had enough of Goliath. Having been constantly exposed to the poor state of his associates and bandmates' physical and mental health, and all the mishaps that continued to flood his studio in more ways than one, this became the straw that broke the camel's back. So without thinking twice, he took the board to a far and undisclosed location, broke it in half, wrapped it in cloth, and buried it deep into the ground. Despite his actions that supposedly suppressed the bad luck, Omar remained skeptical and had a feeling that his bandmates kept talking about Goliath, the soothsayer, and the negative forces that continued to push them. He then insisted that everyone in the group had to refrain from ever speaking about the soothsayer and the curse ever again under any circumstances for the remainder of the album's production, all the while preventing them from ever knowing the burial grounds of the talisman. Because evil spirits were also known to hypothetically feed on negativity, the band decided to counteract the malicious intent of Goliath by incorporating more upbeat songs to help ward off any excess wicked energy, and after a while, it actually worked. The Mars Volta managed to suppress the malevolence with more cheerful songs while maintaining the complex, schizophrenic elements they originally intended for the LP. 2 examples that were partially responsible for balancing the evil with more vibrant sensations were the tracks Ilyana and Metatron, who according to Cedric was said to have cured ailments that were associated with Ouija boards. It wasn't just the music itself that repelled the curse. Cedric and Omar even said that their drummer Thomas Prugen was partially responsible for his bright, carefree energy which helped to alleviate the band's worries. After a period of time where they felt like they were almost complete with the recording, there were no hiccups of any kind. No electronic faults, no health-related complications, no floods, no mental breakdowns, nothing. Everything ran like clockwork for the Mars Volta and things only got better for them. And at long last, after infuriating months of dealing with an evil spirit, the Bedlam In Goliath was finished in the last quarter of 2007 and the Mars Volta were free from the soothsayer's wrath. It was released on the 30th of January 2008 and earned a lot of positive reactions from multiple outlets including Rolling Stone, Drowned in Sound, Alternative Press and Billboard, and has since been deemed a fan favourite. The following year, the band would then be nominated and win the Grammy Award for Best Hard Rock Performance for the song Wax Simulacra. To this day, some fans consider the story of the Bedlam In Goliath's production to be nothing more than a publicity stunt by the Mars Volta to entice more people into purchasing the album. Some even thought that they were tripping on psychedelics, but a lot of the Mars Volta's following believed the stories and the ill-fated episodes during the making of the Bedlam In Goliath. Nonetheless, Cedric and Omar would never shy away from discussing the topic in all the interviews they did on camera or by phone. They also said in these interviews that the entirety of the Bedlam In Goliath could be interpreted as a giant metaphor for honor killing and how the women in the Middle East were treated and scorned. What gave this concept away was that the spirit of Goliath was made up of a man and 2 women, and the male could be heard by the band members more than the women and her daughter when communicating with the Dark Force. Above all, if you read the lyrics composed by Cedric, you'll find a lot of the quotes that reference some of the events that occurred, the flooding of the studio, the threats that they received from Goliath, and the entity wanting to vacate to a body. So as we're drawing to a close to this video, I think it's time we answer the question that's on everyone's mind. Is the Bedlam In Goliath cursed? The answer? Highly unlikely. The actual music does harness an unsettling aura in certain moments throughout the record, but there haven't been any legitimate answers from anyone that might have triggered the supernatural just from playing the physical media or even streaming the tracks. I have, however, seen a number of comments on social media of people sharing stories about what happens when they played the LP on spin cycle for a certain amount of time. Some seemed rather facetious, some sounded like they were actually being haunted. Some have theorized that Goliath's curse wouldn't get stronger from listening to the album, but instead weaken it the more it was played. Cedric also stated that some of the lyrics in the Bedlam In Goliath were inspired by the Santerian tradition that Omar's family practiced, served as a protective barrier for the band, and it was implied to do the same for the listener. The Mars Volta also had their own version of the Soothsayer printed into the gatefold of the vinyl release, along with a 7-inch 45 that was shaped as a plankshot for the fans to more or less play their own Ouija game, with the songs acting as a sort of ghost trap. This isn't the first record in history to have been allegedly plagued with bad luck, as there have been numerous articles and theories regarding songs that were suspected of being cursed, including Robert Johnson's Crossroad Blues, Helter Skelter by the Beatles, and Gloomy Sunday by Rezo Ceres, but this is another topic I plan to do for another future video. In regards to the music itself, it's much more chaotic and unhinged compared to everything else the Mars Volta have ever composed, almost as if you yourself are being exposed to a demonic presence. While maintaining their signature progressive rock sound, it's probably the closest they've ever come to resonating with metal. The Bedlam In Goliath isn't nearly as polished as Francis the Mute or De-Loused in the Comatorium, but if you crave some tumultuous rock with a tinge of jazz fusion and math-inspired elements, by all means, play the Bedlam In Goliath as much as you desire. I guarantee you'll have a fun experience with it, and hopefully entice you in getting to know more about the Mars Volta's back catalogue.
And my question is Goliath still on you? Have you got him? With the album coming out, are things getting better? I mean, tell me the truth.
It depends whether you play the game and help us get rid of him.
I'm playing the game, baby. I'm with you. He's going away.
Thank you.
Prayers are with you guys.
Thank you.
That was pretty freaky, wasn't it? But I hope you guys enjoyed that video. I certainly had a lot of fun making this video, as I normally do, but this was definitely one of the most obscure topics that I had ever thought of doing, especially seeing as I've seen a number of articles on Reddit and all sorts of different journalist websites in regards to this certain album, but I've never seen anyone actually do a whole video essay on this album on YouTube, so I thought, why not do it myself? But fear not, guys, if you want to listen to the Bedlam In Goliath, like I said in the video, please, by all means, go ahead and listen to it as much as you want. It will make the Mars Volta happy, and it will make Goliath suffer. I guarantee it. So anyway, for the next video, we're going back into some more Vaporwave related topics. I just felt like doing this one because I thought it was fun, just for you guys to also get to know more about my personal favorite bands. I may do some more videos like these on a particular album, maybe on a certain bands that I find extremely interesting, who knows. But until then, I'll see you in the next video, and big love from your boy down under, Daydream Deluxe.